When you hear the word beatitude, you don't hear that every day. So I had to look it up. It's a Latin word, and it literally means blessedness. Back in Jesus' day, the expression held powerful meaning of divine joy and perfect happiness. So when Jesus says, "Blessed are those who do these things," he is saying, divinely happy and fortunate are those people who possess these inward qualities. While speaking of current blessedness, each pronouncement also promises a future reward. The Beatitudes are the beginning of Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. If we were to summarize the Sermon on the Mount, in a single sentence, it would be this: how to live a life that is dedicated to and pleasing to God, free from hypocrisy, full of love and grace, full of wisdom and discernment. The Sermon on the Mount is Jesus' longest speech, and it is covered in the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 5, 6, and 7. It comes very early in the ministry of Jesus, after he is baptized by John the Baptist, and he has just returned from a fast, and where he was tempted by Satan. And he is in Galilee, and he notices all these great fat crowds following him from all around, and he sees them and goes up on a mountain. He is followed by his disciples, and the disciples gather around his feet, and he begins to preach. And the first beatitude is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And when I heard poor in spirit, I thought to myself, but I want to be full of the Spirit. I want to be filled with everything that God has to offer. But in this phrase, poor in spirit, is a different kind of spirit. It's more of a pridefulness and more of a kind of get over yourself. Get yourself out of the way so God can do his work. Another way to look at it is, blessed are those who humbly recognize their need for God, for they will enter into his kingdom. The Beatitudes present a new set of ideals that focus on love and humility rather than force and extraction. They echo the highest ideals of Jesus' teaching on spirituality and compassion. Jesus starts off with blessed are those who are poor in spirit, because being poor in spirit means we aren't attached to all the stuff we have. It's an understanding that God has given you all the great things and blessings, and we should be thankful and even willing to give them up or share them with others. All our things on earth don't matter because we can't take them with us to heaven, which will be more amazing than we can imagine. So to be poor in spirit is to detach yourself from earthly possessions and desires and attach yourself completely to God. Rely completely on God in all things. After my walk to Emmaus, I wanted to go to a concert with my best friend. And when I told Donald that we were going to go, he said, you really want to listen to that kind of music still? And I thought, yeah, it's just a concert. I wasn't really thinking it was that big of a deal. And he said, well, maybe you should pray about it. Well, those of you who know me know I talk more than I listen. And I was a baby Christian at the time, so I didn't hear God as well as I do now. And so I reached out to Pastor Jerry, and I asked him, I said, can I not be a Christian and want to learn more things and still go to this concert? And Jerry said, I'll get back to you, because he had to look that one up. And so this goes on for about a week, and I'm asking various people, and Jerry's like, yeah, there's times in the Bible where, prophets went places where undesirable people were, and they made it out just fine. And so I decide, of course he says, it's ultimately up to me. So I finally made up my mind, and I said, I'm going, which is a huge step for me because I'm very indecisive. And I said, I'm going to go. So I sit down at my computer and I pull it up to buy the tickets, and guess what? It's sold out. So not only did I not get to go to my concert, but that was my answer. I finally heard what God said. And he said, yeah, I don't want you listening to that kind of stuff anymore. And then I had to go tell Donald he was right. So when Jesus gives us these Beatitudes on the Sermon of the Mount, he stresses that theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus is offering a whole new way of life. And your promise is eternity in the kingdom of heaven. So when we received the 10 Commandments in the Old Testament, they were more like rules and laws. You shall not do this, you will not do that. But in Jesus' message, his is a message of humility and charity and brotherly love. He teaches transformation of the inner person. We have to change from inside. And he presents these changes in a positive sense, and they are virtues in life which will ultimately lead to our reward. Love is the motivation for all Christians. And the Beatitudes have a meaning that they all promise us salvation, not in this world, but the next. They also bring peace in the midst of our trials and tribulations on earth. This first Beatitude is at the bottom of, think of it as a ladder. And you have to do all these steps to get in to achieve your goal of being a good Christian person all the time and getting into heaven. So if you're poor in spirit, or you have to get rid of all your pride and all your stuff and be poor in spirit before you can move on to recognizing and being blessed as a meek person or being a peacemaker. And the cause for placing the Beatitude first is found in the fact that you need the experience. It's essential that you lay the soil in which everything is going to be produced. No one can mourn God until they are poor in spirit. They don't get to be meek towards others until they view themselves humbly. If they hunger and thirst after righteousness, it's not possible if you have a high view of your own excellence. And mercy is often too difficult for those who are unconscious of their own spiritual need. Poverty in spirit is a temple of blessedness. A wise man would never think of building up the walls of his house until he first made the foundation. No person skilled in divine things will see higher virtues until the poverty of spirit is absent. Until we are emptied of ourself, we cannot be filled with God. Stripping must be wrought upon us before we can be clothed with the righteousness which is from heaven. Christ is not as precious to us until we are poor in spirit. Pride blinds our eyes, and sincere humility is the only thing that can open them. The beauties of Jesus will be forever hidden from us unless we find a way to do that. The strait gate is not wide enough for the man to enter with his own esteem. It's easier for the camel to go through the eye of that needle that they talk about than it is for anyone who is conceited or has riches can enter the kingdom of heaven. Having spoken much upon the character of those who are in spirit, he ends it with, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And he's not saying theirs will be the kingdom of heaven. If you are poor in spirit and you recognize that God is the only one who can fill you, then the kingdom of heaven is yours. The truth is clearly revealed in scriptures. There's a lot of kings. They judge people. He shall spare the poor and the needy. The son of David, when he came to the son of the cave, he said everyone was in distress and everyone was in debt and everyone was discontented, gathering themselves unto him. Since Jesus has chosen the poor in spirits to be his subjects, he said, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And we see how true it is that they are blessed. The rule of the kingdom is such as only the poor in spirit will endure. To them, it's an easy yoke from which they will have no wish to be released. To give God all the glory is no burden. To cease from self is not difficult. The place of lowliness suits them, and the service of humiliation they count as an honor. Surely I have behaved and quieted myself as a child that is weaned of his mother. My soul is even as a weaned child. Self-denial and humility are duties of Christ's kingdom and are only easy to those who are poor in spirit. A humble mind loves humble duties, and a willingness to kiss the least flower which grows in the valley of humiliation. A fair show of the flesh is a great attraction, and self-exaltation the object of life. The self-righteous care nothing for pardon. It's through the Redeemer's blood that we are saved. The Father himself has made us to be partakers of the inheritance of saints in the light. All of these blessings presented to us in the Beatitudes start with being poor in spirit, and not one of them would be valued by a Pharisee. A robe of righteousness completes our nakedness. Manna from heaven implies the earthly lack of bread. And salvation is vanity if men are not in danger, and a mockery if they are not sinful. Poverty of spirit opens the eyes to see the preciousness of the covenant of these blessings. He that is poor in spirit is a Christ admirer. He has high thoughts of Christ. He sets a high value and appreciation upon Christ. He hides himself in Christ's wounds, bathes himself in his blood, wraps himself up in his robe, and sees a spiritual death and famine at home. He looks out to Christ and cries, "Lord, show me thyself, and let it be sufficient." We find that the privileges of the kingdom are suitable only to the poor in spirit, and we may rest assured that they were prepared and belong there. It's clear that those who are poor in spirit do actually reign as kings unto God. The crown of this kingdom will not fit every head. It fits the brow of none but the poor in spirit. No proud man reigns in the kingdom of heaven. He is the slave of his boastings. The ambitious world grasps after the kingdom, but there isn't one. The humble in heart are content, and the contentment are made to reign in high spirits. Only the lowly heart has peace. The world looks for lofty, ambitious, self-sufficient men, and those people bear themselves like kings. The real kings are the people following the meek and lowly, like the Lord of all. The kings among mankind, the happiest, the most powerful, the most honorable, will one day be seen not as Alexanders or Caesars or Napoleons, but as the men who washed the disciples' feet. Those who in quietness lived for God and their fellow man, conscious of their failures, unselfish, holding themselves in low esteem, being humble and devout because their own spiritual poverty drove them out of themselves and led them to rest upon the Lord. The dominion awarded by this beatitude to the poor in spirit is not common. It's the kingdom of heaven, a heavenly dominion, far excelling anything which can be obtained this side of the stars. Only as we are poor in spirit have we any evidence that the kingdom of heaven is ours. Whether things present to come to the poor in spirit belong all the security, honor, and happiness which the gospel kingdom is calculated to give upon the earth. Even here, they may eat of its dainties without question and revel in its delights without fear. Poor in spirit are words that sound as if they described the owners of nothing, yet they describe the inheritors of everything. Happy poverty. Millionaires sink into insignificance. Treasures of the earth evaporate in smoke. The poor in spirit remain boundless, endless, faultless, and it renders them blessed in the esteem of He who is God, over all, blessed forever. And all this is for the present life in which they mourn and they need to be comforted. Hunger and thirst, they need to be filled. For them, while they yet are persecuted for righteousness' sake, they must be their blessedness when they shall shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. And in them shall be fulfilled the promise of their master that will grant to come sit with me in my throne. Even as I overcame, I am set down with my Father in his throne. On the first beatitude to the production of those who follow after, and unless a man possesses it, he may look in vain for favor at the hands of the Lord. The proud are cursed. Their pride alone secures them in the cursed and shuts them out from divine regard. So get over yourself, open yourself, and so you may be filled and enjoy the kingdom of heaven as Jesus promised. Amen.